Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Briefings Direct Voice of the Analyst podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on the latest insights into hybrid IT and multi-cloud management. IT architects and operators face an increasingly complex mix of identifying and automating both the best performance and the best price points across their cloud options. The modern IT services procurement task is made more difficult by the vast choices public cloud providers offer, literally hundreds of thousands of service options. New tools to help optimize cloud economics are arriving, but in the meantime, waste in spend for unchecked cloud computing is rampant. We'll now hear from an IT industry analyst about what causes unwieldy cloud use and how new tools, processes, and methods are bringing insights and actionable analysis to gain control over hybrid IT sprawl. Here to help us explore new breeds of IT management solutions is William Fellows, founder and research vice president at 451 Research. Welcome, William.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Welcome.
We're delighted you're here. William, let's start at the top. How much waste is really out there when it comes to enterprises buying and using public cloud services?
A lot, and it's growing daily. And I mean specifically because buyers are now spending, thousands, tens of thousands, and even in some cases millions of dollars a month on their cloud services. So, the amount of wastage goes up, as the bill goes up. But I think anyone who works in the field can probably tell you that what they see out there is that using, for example, some cost optimization, resource optimization tools and so on can probably save the average organization about 30% of the cost on their monthly bill. So if your monthly bill is $100, that's one amount, but if your monthly bill is $1 million, then that's another amount. So that's the kind of wastage in terms of percentage terms, which I think is being seen out there. But what we're really talking about here is the process and how it comes to be that there is such a waste of cloud resources. And these are, really driven by things that can be done fairly easily in terms of managing that to rein in these wasteful charges.
What are some of the top reasons for this lack of efficiency and optimization? Are these just growing pains that people adopted cloud so rapidly that they lost control over it, or is there more to it than that?
I think there's a couple of effects. So at a high level, I think there's the sort of massive organizational dysfunction around cloud and IT, which is driven primarily because cloud, as we know, is often and usually a decentralized purchase at large organizations. And so that means there's often a variety of different groups and departments using cloud. And so there's no single central or logical way of controlling that cost. I think, secondly, simply the number of available services and the complexity of trying to deal with all the different nuances with regard to different image sizes, keeping tabs on who's doing what, that also is, underpins this kind of, resource wastage. So there isn't, one single reason. And, quite frankly, this thing is all moving forward so quickly that users always want to get to the next rather than deal with what they, have already been doing. And, one term comes to mind, I suppose, for organizations which are fearful of runaway costs, and that's the drunken sailor effect, where an individual or group or within an organization just starts using, cloud services without regard to any kind of cost management or economic kind of insight. And so in those cases, cloud costs can spiral fairly dramatically. And that, of course, is the fear for the CIO, and especially when trying to build a business case for accelerating the conversion to cloud at an organization. So I think those are, some of the reasons, but some of the actual mechanisms by which organizations are able to better control and eliminate waste are fairly simple things. And even AWS has a mantra on this, is, simply turn things off when they are no longer needed. Make sure that you are using the right size of instance, for example, for what you're trying to achieve. And, make sure that you work with tools that can turn things off as well as turn things on. In other words, services which are flexible to support that.
Of course, what we're seeing at the same time, William, is more organizations are using multiple clouds in multiple ways. So even if AWS, for example, had an opportunity to give you more insight and clarity into your spend and therefore allowed you to know when to turn things off, that doesn't carry across the hybrid environment that people are facing. So the complexity is ramping up at the same time as these spiraling costs. I wonder, though, if in other aspects of an enterprise, if there was 30% waste going on, the CFO would get involved, and the chief procurement officer would come to bear and say, listen, we're going to do some centralized purchasing here, right? Why don't we see the business side of these enterprises come in and take over when it comes to fixing this waste problem?
So you're right. So in the first instance, in defense of the hyperscalers, I would say that they are now doing a much better job of providing tools for doing cost reporting on their services. But of course, they're only interested in really managing the cost on their services and not on third-party services. And as we transition towards a world which is hybrid and multi-cloud, those approaches are deficient. What it has meant is there's been a consolidation around the cloud cost reporting and monitoring technologies, and that really we're on to the next wave here of much more forensic resource optimization services and so on, in order to really grasp the ability to do this over multiple cloud services. Now, coming back to why isn't this done centrally, again, because much of the sort of use and purchase is somewhat decentralized, there is no single version of the economic truth, if you like, that's being used to plan and manage and budget. And also, I think because for most organizations, they have one foot in the new world and they still have a foot in the old world, right? In the old procurement models, in the old ways of accounting and budgeting and cost reporting and so on, which are unlikely to work in a cloud context. And so that's why we're seeing the rise of new approaches. I mean, collectively, these things were called cloud management services or cloud management platforms. But I think the language that the industry is using is now evolving here, and the term that's falling into use is cloud governance. And that implies that it's not only the optimization of resources and infrastructure and apps and workloads, but that's also governance in terms of the economics and the cost, and governance when it comes to security and compliance as well. And I think that's largely the result, because while enterprises do want a verifiable ROI, they do want to control runaway costs, that's one dimension of the problems that they are facing, in dealing and grappling with this conversion to cloud. So economics is important. It's not the only factor out there.
Well, it seems to me that this is a problem that needs to be solved if the waste continues to grow if decentralization proves to be a disadvantage over time, it behooves the cloud providers, it behooves the enterprise, certainly the IT organization, to start to get a hold on this. And I think you all have recognized that the economics is, as you say, a big part, not the only part, but worth focusing on. So you've created there at 451 Research a digital economics unit and a 451 price index. Tell me why you've done that and what you hope to bring to the market in terms of accelerating a movement towards a solution to this waste problem.
So thanks for bringing that interview. So I created the Digital Economics Unit here at 451 about 5 years ago, and we produce a range of pricing indicators to help end users and vendors understand the cost of doing things in different kinds of hosted environments. And the first sort of set of indicators is around the cloud. So the Cloud Price Index acts like a consumer price index, which measures the cost of a basket of goods and consumer goods and services over time. So the Cloud Price Index measures the cost of a basket of cloud goods and services over time to understand, where the pricing is going. And of course, 5 years ago, when really we were just at the sort of beginning of the wave, there was an enormous amount of interest in the relative cost of doing things in AWS versus Azure versus Google or in other places, and as these firms added services. So what we've done was to assemble a basket of cloud goods and services and price that in the market that provides a real average price per basket of goods. And we do that by public cloud, we do it by private cloud, we do it in commercial code, VMware, Microsoft, etc., as well as open source like OpenStack, and we do it by global regions. So that has been used by enterprises to understand, essentially whether they're getting a good deal from their supplier or whether they're paying, over the market rates. And for vendors, obviously to help them with their pricing and packaging strategies. In the early days, we saw quite big shifts in cloud pricing as the vendors kind of introduced their new basic infrastructure services. Recently, this has sort of fallen off. So although cloud is falling in price, it is only coming down. So this year, I just checked that the basket of goods that we use has fallen by about 4% this year, and that other global regions, so that's in the US, you can expect in Europe and Asia Pac to still pay, for example, a premium of 10% and 25% respectively for the same cloud services in those regions. Coming back to the point about waste and so on, so we've got about a dozen services in the basket of cloud goods, so not only compute, storage and networking, but SQL, non-SQL, bandwidth, all kinds of other things. Now, if you were to choose the provider which offers the cheapest service in each of those, and you did that across the basket of goods, you would actually make a saving of 75% on the market cost of that basket. So it goes to show that there is an awful lot of headroom in the market in terms of pricing.
Yeah, just if I could pause you, William, let me make sure I understand what that 75% represents. That means that if you had clarity and you were able to shop with full optimism, you could reduce your cloud bill by 75%. Is that right?
Correct, yes. So if you were to choose the cheapest provider of each one of those services, you would save yourself 75% of the cost over the average market price of those.
Wow, that's massive.
Now, but by the same token, no one is doing that because that's way too complex, and there's nothing in the market available that would allow someone to do that anyway, let alone manage that kind of complexity. But I think the key thing here is it shows that there's a great deal of opportunity and room for innovation in this space. So we're not done with pricing, and indeed, I think we feel here that price of cloud or the compute piece, may go down further. I think it's unlikely to reach zero, but I think what's much more important now in determining the cost of using cloud are all of the other services which are now being sold on top. All of the the vendors are moving as quickly as they can to add higher priced and higher value services on top of the basic infrastructure. The game is now beyond infrastructure, and that's why we have added to the cloud price index, in addition to the basket of cloud goods and services essentially aligned around the infrastructure piece. We've now added 16 managed services to that, so you can see what you could expect to be paying in the market for those different services, and by different region and so on, because that's really where, the battleground and the opportunity for service providers is now.
So clearly, 451 Research has identified a big opportunity for improvement, and now the question is, well, what's preventing people from doing that? One is the complexity, of course, and maybe you can fill us in on some numbers around that complexity. Why is it so difficult to get a handle on the number of cloud services? And then secondarily, once we start to get more monitoring and we recognize that we not only can save money, but we can get better governance in terms of compliance and security, what needs to happen next in order for companies to be able to execute once they've gained more visibility?
One of the things that we like to do with the Cloud Price Index is to ask folks we're speaking with, well, just how many different things do you think you can buy from the hyperscale vendors now? And the answer as of last week was more than 500,000. So that's more. There are more than 500,000 SKUs available from AWS, Azure, and Google now. So, how anyone is a human is supposed to keep up with understanding what combination of these things might be most useful within their organization. You need more than a degree in cloud economics these days to be able to figure that out. So, and that's why I talked earlier just very briefly about this kind of second wave of cloud cost management tools coming into view now, and specifically, these are around resource optimization and so on, and having a very forensic kind of view of use. So this is more than just looking at your monthly bill. This is real time looking at how the services and so on are performing, and recommending actions on that basis to optimize their use from an economic point of view. And some of these are now already starting to employ, let's say, more than automation, so machine learning, so that the tools themselves can learn from what's going on and make decisions based upon those. So there's a whole raft of these vendors which we're covering, within the research here, and I fully expect that, like the initial wave of cloud cost reporting tools have largely been acquired, that these tools will probably go the same way, because the vendors which are trying to build out end-to-end cloud governance portfolio are going to need to have this kind of introspection and optimization, as part of their offerings.
Right. Well, of course, like we've seen in IT in the past, oftentimes we'll have new problems, but that they have a lot in common with a similar wave of problem and solution years before. And so there used to be a lot more difficulty in knowing what you had inside your own internal data center, and vendors came to the rescue with IT management tools, agent-based, agentless, crawling across the network, finding all the devices, recognizing certain platforms and then creating a map, if you will. So we've been through this before, William. We've seen how IT management has created the means, technically, to support centralization and management and governance. So are the same vendors who were behind IT management traditionally now extending their capabilities to the cloud, and who might be some of the top players that are able to do that?
And you make a very relevant point there, because although it's taken them some time, the incumbent, let's say, sort of system management vendors are re-architecting, re-engineering, and either by organic in-house development or by partnership or by acquisition, extending to remodel their environments for the cloud opportunity. And many of them have now assembled real and meaningful portfolios. So whether that's Cisco or BMC or CA, HPE, IBM, and so on, most of these folks now have a good set of tools for doing this. But it's taken them a long time to get there. But there again, sometimes some of these firms, don't need to do anything for, a number of years, and they can still come out on top of this market. I think one of the questions is whether there is room for, long-term, profitable, growing, independent firms in this area. Well, that remains to be seen. I think the most likely candidates, in fact, are not the range of independent ISVs which are out there. So we might want to think about RightScale as being, one of the longest-serving folks in the market. But instead, I believe it will be the managed service providers. So these are the folks who are providing ways for enterprises to achieve this conversion to cloud and achieve the conversion to the use of, multiple cloud services to meet their different needs. And in order to be able to do that, of course, they're going to need to be able to manage those resources and so on in a logical way. And I really do think that there is a new breed of these managed service providers coming to the market now that are essentially born in the cloud or cloud native, in their approach, rather than the sort of most of the incumbent vendors who have, effectively bolted this on to their environments. I think one of the exceptions here, that we could talk about is HP, because what they've done, of course, is to shed most of their legacy software business to Micro Focus and actually, come from a cloud-native starting place for the tooling to do this. So they've taken a somewhat differentiated approach to, the other folks in the market who have really been assembling things through acquisition. The other sort of set of folks in the market who in their DNA is working with multiple services, of course, are the traditional systems integrators, whether that's Accenture or Capgemini or DXC or any of these folks. But quite frankly, those organizations are really only interested in working with the, let's say the global 1,000 or 2,000 companies. And, as we know, the conversion to cloud is happening across the industry. So there's a tremendous opportunity for folks to work with all kinds of companies which are moving into the cloud.
Right, and of course, going back historically in IT, we've recognized that having multiple management points solves part of the problem, but not the whole problem, that organizations tend to want to consolidate their management and have a single view across not just the data center or private cloud, but public clouds, multi-clouds. Is what you mentioned with HPE as a differentiator being cloud native It seems to me that having a single point across all of the hybrid continuum is going to be an essential attribute. Is that something you're seeing in the market as well?
Yes, it is. Although I don't think there's any one company or one approach which has a leadership position here yet, which makes it all the more interesting, but somewhat risky for end users at this point, which is why our counsel to enterprises is to work with vendors who can offer a full and a rich set of services. The more things that you have, the more able you are going to be able to undertake and navigate this journey, to the cloud, and then support the digital transformation, on top. So working with vendors who have loosely coupled approaches, which allow you to take advantage of, let's say, a core set of native services, but then to use perhaps your own tools or third parties, coming in via APIs. And that may be a platform approach, or it may be a SaaS service approach. But again, at this point, I don't think any of the firms have sufficiently joined up these approaches to be able to operate, right across the hybrid IT environment. But it seems to me that HP is doing a good job here in terms of joining these things together. So on the one side of the house is the mature and well understood OneView environment, which has now been purposed to provide a software-defined way of provisioning infrastructure. And the other piece is the OneSphere environment, which provides the sort of API-driven management for applications, services, workloads, the whole workspace and developer piece as well. Now, so one is kind of coming top-down and the other one bottom-up, and I think, once those things become integrated, that will offer a pretty rich way for organizations to manage their hybrid IT environments. Now, if you're also using HP's composable Synergy infrastructure, then you're going to get an exponential benefit from using those. The Cloud Cruiser cost reporting is now embedded in OneSphere, and HP is also has a leading position in this kind of hardware, the consumption model for using hardware services, via its Green Lake offering. So it seems to me that there's enough to appeal to many of those interests within an organization, but crucially, it'll allow IT to retain control at the same time. Now, HP is not unique, and it seems to me that all the vendors are working, heading in this sort of general direction of travel. But the HPE offering, looks like it's coming together pretty well here.
Yeah, so a great deal of maturity left, but it seems to me an opportunity big enough to drive a truck through if you can bring together an ecosystem and a platform approach that appeals to those MSPs, appeals to those systems integrators, works well in the large Global 2000, but also has a direct role towards a small to medium-sized business. Very big opportunity here, and I think businesses and IT operators should begin to avail themselves of learning more about this market, because there's so much to gain when you do it well. And as you say, competition is going to push get vendors forward. So a huge opportunity out there. Last question, William. What should IT organizations be doing now to get ready for what the vendors or the ecosystem in cloud management and optimization is going to bring forward? What should you be doing now to get in a position where you can take advantage of what the marketplace is going to provide?
I think there's a couple of things which organizations need to be doing right now. And first and foremost is moving towards a position of cloud readiness. And what I mean is understanding to what extent applications and workloads are suitable for moving to the cloud, and then undertaking the upfront re-architecting, refactoring, modernization, and so on that will allow them to move into the cloud without the sort of complexity and cost and disruption of the sort of first generation lift and shift approaches. So, in other words, getting your own house in order, so to speak, and preparing for the move into the cloud. What that will mean is that it'll become apparent that some applications and workloads will be suitable for some kind of one kind of service, maybe a public cloud. Other types of apps and workloads are going to be more suited to another kind of environment, whether that's maybe that's a hosted private environment. Then you're going to have applications that you want to take advantage, the edge and IoT and so on. So you're going to want a different set of services for that. So the challenge then is going to be working with a provider who can help you with that. And one of the things that we do know is that most organizations are accessing cloud services via a partner. And in fact, in AWS's case, it's I think 90% of the Fortune 100 companies that it has as customers are accessing its services via a partner. And this comes back to the role and the rise of the managed service provider who can deliver value add by enabling an organization to work and use different kinds of services to meet different needs and to manage those as a logical resource. That is the way that I think organizations need to approach this cloud piece, because although it would seem that we've been doing this now, or AWS has been, had service out there for 11 years now, the majority of the opportunity here is still ahead of us, and up till now it's still only been the early adopters which have converted to cloud, which is why there's such a land grab underway at present to be able to capture the majority of that opportunity.
Yes, and I'm sure we could go on for another 30 minutes on just one more aspect to this, which is the skills. It appears to me that the required skills for doing this cross into the economics, so procurement, best practices, as well as the technical side of it. So perhaps a whole new class of people within companies that have backgrounds in economics, procurement, optimization, and management methods, as well as understanding deeply the technology and cloud requirements.
And you're right. So 451's Voice of the Enterprise data actually shows that the key barrier to accelerated adoption is not technology but skill shortage, right? So across operations, across architecture, across security indeed. And again, I think that's one of the opportunities for the managed service providers is to help upskill a customer's own organization in these areas is going to be a driver for success. Because, of course, when we talk about being in on the cloud, we're not talking so much about the technology, but we're talking about the operating model. And that really is the key here. That is, consumption-based, service-driven, with a retail model discipline. It's more than CapEx to OpEx. It's more than hardwired to agile. It's kind of all of those things, and that's really the transformation of an enterprise's own organization is really the most difficult and challenging thing going on here. So whatever a supplier can do to assist customers with that, to rotate to that model is likely to be more successful.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how IT architects and operators face an increasingly complex mix of identifying and automating both the best performance and the best price points across their cloud options. And we've learned how new breeds of hybrid and multi-cloud management methods and solutions are bringing new insights and actionable analysis to help gain control over hybrid IT sprawl. So please join me in thanking our guest. We've been here with William Fellows, founder and research vice president at 451 Research. Thank you so much, William.
Thanks indeed. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, and a big thank you to our audience as well for joining this special Briefings Direct Voice of the Analyst Hybrid IT Management Strategies interview. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening, and please pass this along to your IT community, and do come back next time.